uncircumcised men and eat with them? That's the question that Peter is confronted with as he returns to the Jerusalem church. Peter had been out traveling in different parts of Palestine, taking care of the fledgling church. And he had this particular experience, this particular encounter with Gentiles. And when news made it back to Jerusalem that he had been in the house of a Gentile, that he had eaten with Gentiles, the more conservative branch of the early Jewish Christian movement confronted him. Why did you go and eat with uncircumcised men, with Gentiles? It's an interesting question. It's the same sort of question that Jesus had been asked on a number of occasions. Why are you eating with tax collectors and sinners? It's fascinating because if you follow Peter in the book of Acts, you're going to see him say and do the same sorts of things that Jesus said and did. And he's going to be questioned in the same sorts of ways. So before today's episode, Peter is traveling on the east coast of the Mediterranean, and he heals a man who had been a paralytic for 8 years. Told him to get up and walk. And then after that, he stopped in Lydda and raised Tabitha from the dead, much as Jesus had raised that 12-year-old little girl from the dead. And while he is still in Joppa, he has this vision. He's up on the rooftop. He's hungry. They're downstairs preparing food for him. And he goes into this trance. And he sees this vision. And it's a vision of this large sheet being let down from heaven by the four corners. And on this sheet are all sorts of animals. 4-footed animals, winged animals, all over it. And clearly, at least some of them are not kosher. Because when Peter hears the voice say to him, "Peter, get up, kill and eat," Peter's like, "No way. I have never let anything unclean pass these lips." Now, to try and put you into kind of the context of Peter, it would be as if we were on our rooftops. Again, I don't know, we slide off. Anyway. If we had had this vision and this sheet came down and it was filled with cats and dogs and gerbils and the voice of God said, "Get up, kill and eat," I've seen some disgust response, even on your faces. Because that's the level that Peter is responding to this. It's visceral. That's gross. That's disgusting. And this happens 3 times. It always happens 3 times with Peter. "I will follow you wherever you go, Lord, even unto death." But he denies him 3 times. And then after the resurrection, Jesus asks him the same question 3 times. "Peter, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you more than these." "Peter, do you love me?" "You know that I love you." "Peter, do you love me?" "Lord, you know everything. You know I love you." "Then feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. Feed my sheep." But what Peter didn't understand was that the sheep that he would be in charge of feeding wouldn't be from just one flock. There would be Jewish sheep and there would be Gentile sheep. And what's fascinating about today's episode in the book of Acts is it's a turning point. And we know it's a turning point because what we heard today was Peter's retelling of the event that happened in chapter 10. So the book of Acts, you have this whole story of Peter and this vision and of him going to the house of Cornelius, this Gentile, of proclaiming the gospel to this Gentile, of following the leading of the Spirit. And it's in great detail. And then when he goes to Jerusalem, and news has reached Jerusalem that Peter did this, he then tells the story in detail. We would not do this in a modern novel. In a modern novel, something happens, and then in the next chapter, the person, it would simply say, and he told them what had happened. It wouldn't repeat the story. But the story is repeated because it's a turning point. During the 40 days when Jesus had been appearing to his disciples after his resurrection, he'd been talking about the kingdom. He'd been preparing them for their ministry into the world. And they asked him this very interesting question that suggests that they have not understood a thing. Jesus, are you now at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? And Jesus essentially ignores the question and says, I tell you what, you're going to be my witnesses. So you wait in Jerusalem until you are clothed with power from on high, and then you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. But when the Holy Spirit came upon those disciples, and they began to witness to the power of Jesus and his love in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, they didn't realize that Jesus meant all people. They thought they were being sent into the world to proclaim the gospel to other Jews. They didn't know that Gentiles were part of the picture. That vision that Peter had was a puzzle to him. He didn't know what to make of it. The men from Cornelius were sent, and the Spirit told Peter, you go with these Gentiles, and don't make a distinction between you and them. And he goes. And when he shows up at Cornelius' house, Cornelius kneels down before him to worship Peter. And Peter says, get up because I'm just like you. There's no difference between us. And in fact, this is what God has been teaching me. That I should never make a distinction between me and someone else. God has been teaching me that I should never call another person unclean or unholy or dirty. We live in a world where it seems like we are making more distinctions between people than we have ever made before. Between old and young, male and female, Republican and Democrat, straight or gay, rich or poor. The Spirit says to Peter and to the church, do not call unclean what I have made holy. Do not make distinctions between yourself and others. So when Peter preaches the good news about Jesus, something shocking happened. The Spirit comes down upon the Gentiles, and they begin to speak in tongues just like Jesus' Jewish followers did on Pentecost. And Peter and the other Jewish believers are shocked by this. And they're like, well, how can we withhold baptism from these Gentiles if God has given them the same Spirit that he gave us? Well, as I said, news makes it to Jerusalem before Peter gets it, and he's questioned. And when he is questioned about why he went to the house of Gentiles and ate with them, he didn't really need to tell a whole story. All he needed to say was, the Spirit made me do it. Why did the Because even though the Spirit came down upon the church at Pentecost and entered into them, the church, the followers of Jesus, had to learn to become acclimated to the movements of the Spirit. There were two conversions that day, Cornelius and Peter. Because what the Spirit was doing was trying to enlarge Peter's heart, enlarge the circumference of his compassion. Dorothy Day worked and lived among the poor in the early 20th century. She was an advocate for the poor and for the working class. And in one of her journals, this little book called The Reckless Way of Love, Notes on Following Jesus, this is what she says. Love and ever more love is the only solution to every problem that comes up. If we love each other enough, we will bear with each other's faults and burdens. If we love enough, we're going to light that fire in the hearts of others. And it is love that will burn out the sins and hatreds that sadden us. It is love that will make us want to do great things for each other. No sacrifice and no suffering will then seem too much. Yes, I see only too clearly how bad people are. I wish I did not see it so. My own sins that give me such clarity. If I did not bear the scars of so many sins, which dim my sight and dull my capacity for love and joy, then I would see Christ more clearly in you all. I cannot worry much about your sins and miseries when I have so many of my own. I can only love you all, you poor fellow travelers and fellow sufferers. I do not want to add one least straw to the burden you already carry. My prayer from day to day is that God will so enlarge my heart that I will see you all and live with you all in His love. My prayer from day to day is that God will so enlarge my heart that I will see you all and live with you all in His love. A few weeks ago, I suggested a small practice that was designed to remind us that we live in the Spirit and the Spirit lives in us. A simple practice of just taking time throughout the day to concentrate, breathe in, breathe out. Inhale the Spirit, exhale the Spirit. Just as a way to remind us of the environment of the Spirit in which we live and move and have our being. And you know, when we breathe in, our lungs get larger, they fill up. And honestly, we all have different lung capacities, right? If I were to ask you all just to hold your breath, we could find out. And what's fascinating is that we can increase our lung capacity, either through exercise or through kind of a regular practice of taking as deep breath as we can and holding it as long as we can. And if we practice that, our lung capacity would increase. Now, when we breathe in the Spirit doesn't enter our lungs, the Spirit enters our heart. And we all know too well that our hearts have a limited capacity for love. But by the grace of God and through the power of the Spirit, our hearts can be enlarged. We can take the Spirit into us in such a way and hold it there and practice this so that over time, the circle of our compassion will get larger and larger. And the number of people outside our circle of compassion will be less and less because they've been included. But we don't do this those whom we haven't loved before, or whenever we dare to love those whom we haven't loved as fully as we would like to, it's like holding the Spirit, taking a deep breath of the Spirit. And it's hard. But over time, through the power of that Spirit, our capacity to love, our capacity to include more people in the circle, our capacity to not make distinctions between people anymore, our capacity to love what God loves will increase. And it's not just a linear increase. I mean, Peter, after this wonderful experience, he relapsed many times in his love for others. He went to Antioch once, which was a community of both Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians. And he was very good at eating with the Gentile Christians until certain people from Jerusalem showed up, and then he would withdraw from them. And Paul confronted him about this. You can read about it in Galatians. But I highlight it because we relapse in our ability to love. Sometimes our capacity for love stretches and sometimes it closes in. But this is the work of the Spirit. God has given us the Spirit, but He has tasked us with the practice of loving, that our capacity of love